Okay, so we're gonna hold off on that for a minute. Let's go talk about construction manager.
Carrie had a PowerPoint for this.
Yes.
So let me give you a little introduction. You know, we have, I conducted one additional facilities advisory meeting. Since John and Tim are on my public facility meeting, the legal counsel felt that at least one of them should not be at that. So Matt attended the one in place of John. We talked with Carrie, and there were a lot of questions of like how we're trying to break this job out. We're waiting for the forest preserve with the parking. We're waiting for some decisions from MWRD in regards to what needs to be done with flood control and water retention. And that's when Carrie started to talk about the possibility of using a construction manager so that we have the ability to break these jobs up and do it under kind of one large umbrella. Another concept that we talked about, if you remember how Carrie's entry into the district kind of occurred, is because we knew we had this life safety work that needed to be complete, this life safety study to be complete, but we also kind of wanted an outside perspective on a lot of the problems most of you, including myself, have inherited left over from the large construction project. I'm going into my 4th year, and we're hopefully about to fix the pool. But if you remember back, we had the flooding in the field house. We had the issue with the boilers. We had a section of the ceiling that dropped down because they didn't weep the bricks over the new entrance. And then we're dealing with the pool. So we've had some pretty significant construction issues. And so as I was talking through those with Carrie, and Carrie seeing the board's ability to pay attention to detail and be very specific, she also started to bring up the construction manager in the sense that it gives the board another set of checks and balances between the architect and the laborers and the contractors, if I'm not mistaken. I believe under our previous contract, with the 66 million, we used a general contractor.
No, and we had a construction manager.
We had an owner's rep. We did not have a construction manager. So an owner's rep is a little different. I believe the owner's rep was a retired business manager, maybe understands more of the bookkeeping side, but maybe not somebody that's in the field, like a construction manager or a superintendent or someone of that, that's doing basically commissioning of the work that's taking place. And so Carrie and I talked about so we've met with some construction managers. We've met with 2. We have a 3rd meeting set up for this week. So we're trying to get some ideas of why this would be a benefit to RB and the district, and what would be the cost savings, what would be the positives, the negatives, as well as we put an RFQ out in the 2 local newspapers so that in the event the board determines they want to go with a construction manager, we'll have some candidates that the board or the facilities committee can interview, or the personnel. I mean, we could figure out how we want to do that, but I had to get the wheels working so that there was some legwork done before the board seen this presentation. But the large thing that I took away from my conversation so far with 2 construction managers, and Carrie will speak to this a little bit, is with our last project, I believe we used a general contractor in McHugh. And so the way that this was all explained to me, and Carrie, please feel free to step in, and I know you're going to go in your presentation, but when you use a general contractor, that general contractor then kind of holds the bid or the contract.
That's correct.
So then, when he's hiring all the trades and all the different subcontractors, whatever money the general contractor can get those individuals to save, or that's all profit then for the general contractor. Where if you use a construction manager and you save money, that's money that can go back to the project or go to pay for something as designed.
Right.
You know, like, and I'm not quite, I don't know, I wasn't here for the details of the other project, but I'm just wondering, like, you know, we forgot to vent the sanitary basin in the special ed wing, so every time the sub pump cleared out, we have the smell of sewer gas. I mean, those are some all big things. I mean, we've had 5 or 6 pretty significant days, and that happens with $66 million of construction. But were those things that maybe, because we didn't have another set of eyes on the field checking on the contractors, that occurred because maybe we only had a general contractor, maybe that he was beating up on the subcontractors to lower their price, that maybe they cut corners, and it's all what if, believe me. I'm not accusing anything of, but I mean, I just rattled off 6 projects that we're still dealing with 4 or 5 years after the construction, so that's why I told her to give the presentation she's gonna give tonight.
All right, why don't you present?
Okay. So if you want to go to the next slide, Mary Ann, you can see that this is kind of a visual that describes the two different contracting methods. And one is the general contracting method, like Dr. Stink has just mentioned. You have our firm, which is the architectural firm, and then a general contractor. The general contractor takes in bids from all these different entities, the subcontractors, and he holds, or she holds the contracts, and that contractor then puts a number together and they submit, and we open that on a bid day. And that relationship is such that it's a lump sum number, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. But here, the general contractor holds the contract for all of his subcontractors. And that number may or may not be the lowest bid from each and every contractor, or he may have not gotten numbers from those contractors, all of them. Whereas the construction manager delivery method, and there's a couple different ways to go about the construction manager delivery method. And again, I'm an architect, I'm not a construction manager, but this is how I understand it. And I would implore you to go ahead and ask these questions if you should move forward with any firm that you decide upon as to the pros and cons of different delivery methods for construction managers. But here, the owner, we still do get the lowest bid from various trade contractors. And what I mean by trade contractors is different concrete contractors, different roofing contractors, different masons, and so on. And those are those trade contractors. But here, the owner would hold those contracts, okay?
Carrie, can I interrupt for a second?
Yes.
One of the cameras catching that screen? Are you all filming us or what she's?
Why don't you catch that
Somebody
screen over
getting
there?
the.
You're gonna need to catch that, you over there are gonna have to
Yeah,
film that
because
screen.
this camera is kind of like front and center of that
So
screen.
film-
Somebody else already has that on TV? Okay,
They
great.
have, they're
You sure?
capturing the computer.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So does everyone kind of understand that relationship of those bubble diagrams? Because with that, I'm gonna go into, different pros and cons of each,
Okay,
all right? With the
everybody
next-
ready? Yeah.
With the next slide. So with the general contracting method, you do not get to select, well, I'll just go in order here. The owner holds one contract, like I already mentioned. There is a single point of responsibility. So there is one person that is in charge, and that is the direct contact for the district, all right? There is a lump sum bid, and when we open that, we do not get a choice of that contractor. It is the lowest possible bid. That is the person that you'll be dealing with, whoever the low bid is for the job. And what is good about this is that in this scenario, whatever's on the drawings, whatever we designed on our drawings is what is the Bible for this contractor. He or she has to provide what is on the documents. That is similar in the construction manager scenario, but it gets important a little bit later, and I'm going to explain that. What happens on bid day from this general contractor is that they would collect all of these bids from different subs, like I mentioned earlier, masons, concrete guys, roofing guys, all that, usually. Sometimes they have unknown numbers. And then they take those numbers and they add it up, and then they add their profit on top of it. And they decide what their profit margin will be, and there's a industry standard depending on the year and the time of bidding and so on. But then they add that up, and then that is the number that you would get on bid day. There's a lot of questions in there, okay, that's important to know. The construction manager, the owner gets all the lowest bids because they're gonna do that process, but with each and every single contract. So on bid day, instead of opening 6 envelopes, you're gonna open 40 envelopes, because it's going to be 5 concrete guys, 5 roofers, 4 masons, so on, all different bids. The general contracting method, you may or may not, they may be the same guys bidding to the same general contractor. Here, the construction manager, and they have no profitable interest in this scenario, the construction manager.
Carrie,
Mhm.
when we did the $66 million bid, I was on the board at that time.
Sure.
And our minutes will show, we, for 3 years, were brought a a different set of bids for each piece of the construction project. So when it was time to do concrete, we had all the bids there. When it was time to bring in the heating and cooling, we had 3 or 4 bids there. When it was time to do plumbing, we had the different bids. So we had a whole series of bids almost every single board meeting, and it wasn't always the lowest bid that was approved.
What you're describing as a construction manager, I don't know what the relationship was, you know, with your previous contracts. I have no knowledge of that.
I mean, that's just what
Yeah.
I remember.
But what you're
for three-
describing is
right.
exactly what I'm explaining.
Okay.
Is it possible that McHugh brought those contracts to the board to show them that they were doing their due diligence?
No, we had to vote on them, because they weren't approved till we voted on them. And that's in the minutes, and that was over a period of 3 years.
I can't speak to what was done. I can only speak to what I'm talking about being different. And I'll be honest, from a general contracting perspective, the size project that we're talking about is fine. I mean, we're doing, we did an addition and renovation at Homewood Flossmoor that's upwards of $25 million with a general contractor. But that's a different client and a different expectation level. And I feel that, as Kevin, or Dr. Skink has already explained, that this is probably a good fit for you and your community, based upon what I'm gonna further explain, which is there's no bid shopping after bid day. So again, what's on the table is on the table, that's what's included. The owner, you have a little bit more control here, because, for instance, one of the CMs that we were talking to said, if you're unhappy with the level of cleaning that was happening, before, the end of construction, well, they would just increase it, and as opposed to being argumentative with a general contractor who might say, well, I didn't have that level of cleaning in my bid, or that's just one kind of scenario. But it gives you a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more, you can manage that a little bit more. You also get to, and I think probably one of the most important aspects on here is you get to pick that contractor. And if you did do that previously, then that's how you wound up with whoever.
I want to say we had both. We had a construction manager and an owner's rep.
And either way, with the CM, that's what you would be able to do, is select those individuals. And you could select the people that you would be working with, much the same way you selected DLA.
Pre-construction service.
And the pre-construction service, they would be on board to overlook, I've given you some estimates, well, they would confirm those. That would be their job as contractors, on a regular basis, they're putting together numbers for
So
bidding.
you have to explain your numbers then,
Right?
or they have to sign off on it.
Well, they don't really sign off, they would create their own numbers. They would take mine and take a look at it and say, thank you, and we would work with them to understand, the complexity of the project and what we would thought of conceptually, and as we move forward, they would do estimates, refined again as we move on, and we would work together. And I think that probably the biggest aspect about the construction management is more of a team kind of oriented approach, whereas the general contracting, we kind of start off at ends, making sure that, okay, we're kind of looking to make sure that they're not cheating on any level and trying to cut corners. And then the CM manages the project with the owner's best interest, because there's no profit involved with that. So there's no, I'm not going to save a couple bucks here and then it goes into my pocket. It's going to be, and I'll explain this a little bit more in the next slide about how they arrive at their dollar amount, because the next question is, okay, well, what does this cost? And then, again, the pre-construction service is not only just about estimating, it's about staging and figuring that all out before you give them 2 weeks to bid in January. All along the way, they'll be working with us to figure out, okay, how are we going to get this done? Do we need to demo a building in December? Does it make more sense to do that and get it out of the way, and they can let a separate package so that they can fast track it?
And that's why the garage was built when it was, the
Oh, really?
auto shop
Yeah.
was built because it used to be part of this building.
Mhm.
So they were able to get it built right away. Yeah.
So, but providing some flexibility, and if we're, trying to figure out okay, what we're doing at the tennis courts, it might provide some of that. Some of the conversations that led to this discussion were, can we demo this early? Can we let this bid package at a different time? And yes, you can, but it would, to help facilitate that, it would be good to have a CM on board.
Okay.
And the next slide then kind of talks about how they arrive at that cost. And really, because we want to know, does it cost more? And to be fair, I guess it depends on the client if it costs more or not, and the different types of delivery methods for construction managers. And I think that if you move forward with this process, you could ask these same questions of the construction managers to talk to you about cost. But really quickly, the subcontractors for the general contracting method, they put together those bids, as I mentioned, then they put their overhead and profit over. As of this year, right now, we're seeing an 8% overhead and profit, okay? And then they put that total cost together. Now, the general conditions are gonna be the same for each side, because you're still gonna need dumpsters, you're still gonna need, toilets for the workers, you're still gonna need all kinds of, soil barriers and temporary partitions and things like that, and fencing. All that stuff is all part of the general conditions. On the CM side, it's itemized, and you get a bill for it. On the general conditions, they just lump sum it into one number, and that's it. On the CM side, they got the general conditions, they also have a CM fee, which I put on here is anywhere between 2% and 4%. Right now, we're seeing about 2.5% typical for that. So you can see that if you just looked at that, there'd be a difference of almost, 4.5%, 4 or 5%. So it doesn't look like the CM as advisor would cost more. If you do as a CM as constructor, which is a little bit different method, and I know there's a question about that, we can talk about that in a little bit. That is really, it seems it might be a little bit more cost effective and allow you to manage your costs in working with them. And that would be someone who could come and report on a monthly basis to your board. Someone may have done that in the past, I don't know, but that's
One of the questions that Carrie and I asked in our meetings with the construction manager is the accounting. I used the example of how our board took it upon themselves to kind of break down the accounting in more detail, because we were, we were unclear, like how much, we wanted to be able to know how much it cost to build the pool. But when we went through all those bills and we went through the spreadsheets, the same cement guy that was maybe doing the pool also did the cement for one of the classroom wings, so we could never really we just knew that a check went out to the cement guy.
Because it was poured at the same time.
Correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so what we were trying to talk about with the construction manager was, this board in particular, and this community in particular, after the last, we want detailed billing to say, this is how much is going in the build of your locker room. This is how much is going into your turf. This is how much is going into flood mitigation, and break it down and itemize that, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that a construction manager can keep track and report out to the board on a monthly basis.
Well, I gotta believe a general contractor could do that too, that's probably not asked for.
And I think that was the issue with the last construction, because they poured all the cement at one time,
But
you
they
had
can
to bill for
identify
cement.
that.
We didn't ask that,
Right.
we allocate the funds, how much of that cement was to the pool, how much was to the wing. If we would ask for that, we could have had that, and then we did have the owner's rep who should have been able to facilitate that.
Okay, let's not focus on what we did previously. We're focusing on this project right now.
Well, I find it very helpful for Laura to make this, because a lot of people, including people at this table, complained about how it was done the last time. Said certain people hired were useless and we couldn't get information out of them. And if
And I was that person.
Any contrast you can make to that would educate me, at least, to say why. I mean, I have two issues. One is, still at the end, you gotta explain to me why some of these things you're talking about aren't included in the services that you're providing under your agreement, like preparing RFPs and reviewing RFPs.
That's not changing, I'm still gonna
Okay,
prepare our
so,
fees
and then the second part of it is, how we make this person hold them to being responsible. If we're gonna pay, 2.5% of the cost, we wanna make sure we get our money's worth out of it.
Well, it looks like you're paying 2.5% of the cost, but the cost is just being relocated to the CM, instead of paying the overhead and profit of the GC.
Well, and
We're
I
still
think what
paying.
we learned from this
Still
process,
paying for it.
as everyone is their team, as Gary said, we didn't ask for those things. And what Tim is bringing up, we didn't know to ask for those things. You know, there are pages and pages of checks on our website from the last construction. But how to break it up that would make sense after the fact, you only learn that as you come through the process. Well, we know better now. We can ask better questions.
Well, I'm just gonna tell you right now, I was involved with the last project, and our owner's rep was very, very weak, and I mean very, very weak.
But our
because
construction
Excuse me,
manager-
excuse me. I was at the owner's rep meeting we had with every 2-week meeting, very, very weak. If this can give us more management, being able to let the board know status-wise where we're at, being able to know that what we're spending is what we're spending for, and we're getting what we have, and we're not gonna wind up with stuff on pieces of paper that, you know, we're trying to decipher out. Does a construction manager do that? And my other question is, so let's take the locker room. Is the construction manager involved all the way down from foundation to building to locker rooms to toilets are they involved with all of that?
Yes.
So are bidding out even for, here's what the lockers are and all that stuff?
And they provide an on-site superintendent and project manager to
Yes.
oversee all the subcontractors on a daily basis.
Yeah, and basically what we're swapping here is the service of the GC. It is not the architectural service that is it's either GC or CM. It's not architect or CM, it's GC or CM. Those services are construction related. They're really not architectural services at all. I'm still doing the drawings, I'm still doing all of that. It's just that when we're starting to talk about putting those in different bid packages, that is not in our scope of services within that AIA contract.
So it's from my understanding, because having the one looking through all the checks and being frustrated with the dollar amount that went to our GC, and when we try to call the GC to even come and see us anymore, they refuse to talk to us with the dollar amounts where it became way over budget, and they got a lot of money for what they did. So I'm gonna drill into a lot of what you do here for your fee and how it associates. And then also, where is the kind of GC fee built into your total cost right now in this proposal?
It's not.
So what's this contractor overhead and profit?
I'm sorry, the general contractor overhead profit isn't.
So that's in that
Yes, I'm
15%
sorry, I thought you
number.
said CM, I'm sorry.
Okay, so what I need to understand, because of my frustration going through this, is why then are you entitled to 9% of their overhead and profit?
That is the cost of doing the actual work. So
what
when you
work do you do
when
associated
buy-
with a contractor?
Well, when you buy, I don't know, any kind of commodity, it has profit built into that for whatever entity has created that, right?
So if we carved out these individually, so for example, building a 6,300 square foot building, I can see an architect spending a lot more time and effort putting together the electric drawings, the plumbing, the mechanical room, compared to doing a roof repair. But yet you're charging us 9% on a complex issue and 9% on a roof repair issue.
Right, it's an overall.
What happens if we carve these out separately? We came through and said, we want you to quote architectural fees on a roof repair. What kind of fee would you charge us? What kind of fee would you charge us on a new building?
Well, they probably would cost you more because you're gonna have me do the same amount of work for all different projects.
So
Which is
to
be
what
more
degree of
paperwork.
work do you need to do for a roof repair?
Well, it's a roof replacement. so
A
what we're
replacement?
gonna
With an
cover.
existing building, with the walls and the caps already around it, what kind of work would be needed on that?
So we're gonna come out and take roof cores and understand the slope, because we don't know currently if you have existing drawings, that's gonna help a little bit, but I know that we've gone through your existing drawings and not really seen much of anything. So what we need to understand is how the water's pitched, are there enough roof drains? We do the studies, the structural, to make sure that if it's ballasted, does it have enough capacity to withstand some more ballast? What is there as far as the dimension? Now there's a different pitch required for a new code, so it's 1/4 inch versus 1/8 inch per slope? Does that work with your existing drain structure? Does that work with the parapets? Because at the end then, you have mathematical calculations that have to determine the tapered insulation that would require to get to that point. So you're gonna have to do that and figure out the aesthetics that wrap around
And a
that.
roofer doesn't do that kind of work? When they come in and do that kind of?
Oh, I'd hate to see the roof that you're just gonna hire a
just-
roofer to do that without a design. That's not, I think that it's in your best interest to hire someone to design that. And
Same thing with bleacher repairs. What kind of additional work would you be doing on bleacher
Well,
repairs?
we're actually replacing
Yeah,
the bleacher.
replacing, yeah.
Yeah, so designing it to code and making sure that it's what you wanted. Yeah. We're going back through and figuring it all out, the capacity and where it's gonna be placed. And depending on the foundation system that we determine is needed, we'd have to get our structural engineer involved in that. It's not just gonna be, hurricane anchors tied to the ground here in this soil. I'm sure it's gonna be more of a substantial, structure, press box, design and so forth. I understand what you're saying is that there's, different levels of intensity for different packages.
So this 9% fee is dependent upon the actual spend. So if we come in and contingency, we don't spend contingency, we negotiate a better thing on a general contractor or whatever,
The
contract
bids are
manager.
low- The bids are low.
Your general 15% types of things, the variable.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm still kind of
Sure.
not, to understand, supplemental lighting to existing system, getting 9% of that, those kind of things. And your typical fee structure, you're able to, 9% is what you always charge people?
Well, it depends on the project, the complexity, the tightness of the schedule, how quickly we need to produce CDs, and the amount of consultants that would be needed.
And
So,
what
no,
is,
it's
how
a
does this
very-
one rate for speed, for number of consultants, blah, 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 complexity level?
I think it falls in line with what we typically charge. I know that there are architecture firms that just do a flat rate of 10% on every single project that there is. I know this because they just did a comparable of our fee in comparison at Evergreen Park. And so they went out and took a look, and that's one of our clients. And, they got some higher, and they got a couple lower. So it kind of fell right in between.
Aren't we talking about construction manager though? Not the-
No, he's.
No, I'm talking about, what are we gonna bid on? What are we gonna approve, Matt?
Both.
I thought you were still going through.
We gotta take a decision on both. maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm ready to.
So Gary, where does the engineer fit in? The last time we went,
That's part of
We
your
also had-
9%, correct?
That's correct.
That's built in.
so
they-
the engineer works then with your
Mhm.
company?
So that's paid out.
That's Jason, that's Brian Berg and Associates, that's our structural engineer, Keith Borsch and Associates, that's all in that.
Okay.
I have another question, as you keep bringing up, Gary, about
What?
the documents. We don't have the documents that would have been helpful. So the question, Kevin, is for you and Joel, do we have an administrative process to start to collect these documents? As Carrie keeps bringing up, we don't have this information that would have saved some work.
You will after we're done.
We're creating this and we're documenting it, it's in a library.
Right.
Mike
We bought
said-
the online file saving system, so everything that we could recover from White
Okay.
has been stored in that new system.
And so then you could go into the district office at any time after this
We
is
don't
done
keep
and we
paper
can-
anymore, but now you have access to CDs. We have some saved on our network as well as with backup saved with their architect.
But we would know the age and when each roof was put on as we
Well,
move forward.
if you remember, I got the book there, they did the study.
Uh-huh.
They have the electronic drawings that they produced and the electronic database that they provided to us, right, for that. So like that book
Okay.
on the study that started this, we have the electronic version of all of it.
And so then our staff is saving that, so 2 boards from now, they're not sitting here saying they can't find those.
I don't think Kevin's can speak for 2 boards,
Doug,
but
at
I'm
least the
confident
next-
he's not going to.
At least the next board won't say we can't find any of those documents that we've paid for, right? Okay. That's one thing.
Okay.
Are there
So-
any more slides, Jerry, or is that it?
I think that is it, isn't it,
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's 2 different types of construction.
Right.
Can you go back, Mayor?
you were gonna explain that.
Sure, there's construction manager as advisor, and there's construction manager as constructor. And the construction manager as constructor holds the contracts then. It's an option, it's between the two. As constructor, they may self-perform as well, which means that they almost would look like that relationship that's on the left. Almost like a general contractor.
What are you recommending?
The good part about the the construction manager as constructor is that you could do if cost is the most important issue, it would be a not to exceed amount. The CM as advisor, I would lean towards in that direction, just because they're looking out, for your best interests, and then there's not going to be, again, that adversarial relationship with the contractor who's trying to cut corners.
So we could probably get pricing on both alternatives if we decide to go
Actually,
this
the
route.
construction manager as constructor is a higher price than the one I'm illustrating there, because it costs more for their insurance, so it is a little bit higher, is what I'm told.
I understand, but if there's two alternatives and there's pluses and
Yeah,
minuses to both.
you could evaluate those.
Tell us what,
Right.
if we did this, what would we gain?
Sure.
Because the one thing, the way you're describing this, where it seems like there's a bit of a weakness is, if you do hire a general contractor, you're dealing with one contractor. He's got to worry about he or she has to worry about all the subs and coordinating the work, and, if this wall didn't reach that
Right.
wall, whose fault is it? If you separate this, then you're relying on this construction manager for all the battles of two different, like we had with the pool, where Kevin had to deal with 3 or 4 different parties, and at the beginning, Joel and Kevin, all they ever heard on all these, it was the other guy's fault,
Right.
right? So how do you avoid that if you're doing this construction manager as advisor?
Right, and I think that you'd want to hear the benefits of both of those and understand them. And listen to the, interviews or whatever, and come up to your own recommendation for that. Obviously, you're the important one here who needs to make a decision that makes you feel comfortable moving forward, given the history of your district. And that is really why, we talked about a construction manager as well. So, again, I don't need a construction manager to move forward. Just understanding the dynamic that's here, it seemed to make some sense. Either way is fine. Like I said, we do $25 million general contract.
Okay,
We'll be
so
fine.
any questions on Terry's presentation?
So let's go back to the example of the boilers. So when the boilers didn't work, everybody was doing this. We went from Johnson, then we put the wrong gas valve in, then we went to 2010, designed the wrong gas valve, then,
One of the mechanical contractors.
we went through 3 or 4 different people.
Right.
We had 2 or 3 different repairs. We were still blowing our burner, and we were still having trouble with the gas, with it not working correct.
Correct.
And then finally, it got resolved by,
Yeah, they, it was kind of, we had to get all the parties together really in a room and work through it that way, and it was messy, but that really is kind of what, it was easier to arrive at a conclusion, with everybody in the room and pointing fingers at each other than.
so one thing I think Joel and I would be looking to hear is the CM or the superintendent and project manager that he assigns sitting on the job with a set of prints from you and your engineer while people are installing mechanicals to make sure that they're following the prints and designed by the engineer, so that, is that like?
I'm not really going to speak to what the superintendent is going to do from that standpoint, but there are a number of checks and balances in place, be it that would be our engineer, our shop drawings, me, the CM would need to get missed in order to have a scenario like that happen.
Okay.
What happens after the construction? Does the CM, so if you have an issue that comes up that was missed, does the CM come in and resolve it, or what's the?
Well, it depends on what it is. If it's something that we're responsible for, we would resolve it. If it's something that, the CM has one of his contractors or one of the contractors are responsible for, they would recommend that it's one of the contractors that take care of it. So it's gonna work, you know, the same way. We're just gonna have to work as a team to understand it. And get down to what's gonna take to fix it and who's responsible for it. But I understand that's how you have to think, it's because of where you came from. Unfortunately, that's a bad way to approach moving forward. But I understand why you're thinking that way.
And then whoever is gonna interview, whoever the board is ultimately gonna pick, just how is the contract gonna be closed? Who's gonna control the punch list? How does the punch list get completed? And then how does it ultimately close the contract in the end? And how it might work with the CM or the G.
Well, and we're gonna have a lot to say in that punch list process. And we'll also still be making recommendations to the owner as to when to pay out. We're still reviewing pay requests, we're still doing all of that stuff that's in our contract, that's our job. So, you know, we're making those recommendations to you. But the CM then is also gonna give you some input as well.
Can I ask a specific question following up on Gary's and trying to understand the overlap? On your services section of our agreement with us, in general, it says that the architect will give us a list of prospective contractors. They shall assist the owner obtaining competitive bids, confirming responses to proposals, determining a successful bid, and awarding and preparing the contracts.
Yeah, so
How
what
does
we're-
that, now that's included in your service 9%. Seems like you're telling me that's what a contract manager would do
So
too.
but the AIA contract, and actually Dr. Skinkis and I talked about this beforehand, and I was gonna get to this. We do need to put an addendum to our contract in order to accommodate a construction manager if that's the direction you go. Right now, we're set up as a GC. You can see that's the AIA B132, I think, is the one that is for the CM. So there's some things that need to change as far as some of the.
Well, here's what you need to, and I think Gary hit on it, and I hit on it, is if I wasn't here today, we would approve this the way it was written. I think there'd be confusion already in it, but now your agreement says you're going to do things that now you're telling us they're going to do. So if we amend this and take this out, are we still gonna pay 9%? Because that was my concern. I said to Kevin going through, their agreement says they're going to do what they're telling us the contract manager's gonna do. Are we gonna pay both people for the same thing? That's where I'm struggling and why I said I'm concerned about the conflict here. And that's just one example, as you know, right?
Yeah, and I still am gonna speak to that as a very minuscule when you're talking about writing a contract versus, I'm still writing an RFP. We're still designing all of everything that is on here. It is still our liability. The only overlap that you just mentioned is with the contracts. But again, if you're not comfortable signing it, then approving it, we'll wait until we get it to the point where you are comfortable with that and you can make the decision of moving forward with the CM.
Man,
Whatever you like.
I have a suggestion, and I almost hate to say this, but, and I have a lot of respect for our lawyers, but they are not construction lawyers. Tim, I know you do contracts all the time, but I don't think you would say construction is your specialty or dealing with projects. I would suggest we consult somebody who does, no offense to you, Gary, obviously, but I would suggest we at least get a bit of advice from somebody who does this all the time, and we can get some thoughts or advice about which way to go, construction manager or general contractor, and maybe we can even find somebody in the community who might do it for us pro bono.
Okay.
I'm thinking of somebody.
But does that, I don't think we need to necessarily vote tonight on the construction manager.
No, I'm not,
Seems to be-
I'm talking about getting some general advice.
Sure.
And then, with respect to the contracts, having somebody look at it quickly.
But the
I just
MOU,
feel
we'd like to get approved by maybe the 9th of September. So do we have somebody that let me contact to look at that?
Let me contact the person I'm
Okay.
thinking of.
But the key thing, Tim, with you is if she puts in that section 3,
Yeah.
right?
You know, in 3.62, says architects will visit the site and stuff, you know, there's different parts that, again, I do it because I work for utility, but, and I can't advise this, the board as an attorney, but I think there's several sections in here that appear to be the same thing you're telling us, the contract manager, and my concern is, as Gary said.
It's not the same, that my observation is not the same as the
Okay.
superintendent.
Okay.
That is not the same. It's completely different. I'm the one who's written the specifications, I'm the one who's looking for quality. So, but you know, you can look at it however you wish, but it's not the exact same observation.
I like Ed's idea.
All right, so we're gonna, on the 9th, make a decision on the memorandum of understanding. We'll make those changes. Please talk to your lawyer about what we want to do in those to make that happen. And then Ed, if you can't, then would Frantic have one, or?
Let Ed
Probably not.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know for sure, but, I mean, I'm talking to somebody, this is all they do.
Okay, all right, so
But would it be a conflict if it was pro bono? I mean,
No.
if we need to do it, if we need to pay for it, we should pay for it. So nobody feels that it would be a conflict that if it was pro bono?
Can't be, nobody
if
can,
the
you
lawyer's
can't
willing
give
to do it.
conflict. You
Look
can't
at
give pro
Gary's
bono
smiling.
advice
Look
if
at
there's a
pro bono over
conflict.
there.
The expertise that
It
counts.
violates the code of conduct.
all right, so Carrie, so let's just conclude what we want to do. Architect memorandum of understanding. You're going to look at making those changes that Tim has asked for. Ed, you're going to look at, talk to us with a lawyer that worked construction. We will, at the 9th meeting, then make a decision on memorandum of understanding, and then at that time too, we should be able to directionally know where we want to go with this construction manager and that stuff.
So Ed's gonna present the talk about both the MOU and get advice on construction manager or GC. Or am I working with Carrie and our legal
Work with
counsel?
Carrie on the MOU right now.
Okay.
But I wanna get somebody lined up to help us. This is just the beginning.
Okay.
Do we need somebody to further advise us between the general manager or the?
That's what I'm talking.
That's what
That's what he's talking
All
about.
right.
Okay, and then I think at the 9th meeting, we should start looking at how if we're gonna go to a construction manager, how we wanna do the interviewing process.
All right, so we need to take a minute and think about also for the timeline, so the board understands what process is needed to complete the, so you and I have met with at least, we'll have it met by the 9th, at least 3, possibly 4. And then we have the RFQ to see what comes in, then we'll do an interview process. The board will need to approve that process. Where are we pushing timelines and where, because if we approve the MOU, there's some, and Ed will get you some more advice on this, but from what I understand, as we approve the MOU, it's to get Carrie rolling. The idea is to try to have a construction manager close, so there's a checks and balance in on Carrie's drawings and Carrie's stuff that she's given us, so that we don't get too far ahead with Carrie, and then a construction manager is gonna come in and say, no, this is all wrong, it all needs to be redone. So I just wanna maybe, am I right on interpreting it that way?
Well, they're not gonna,
I thought there was a timeline here, because we don't wanna get too far ahead of the CM, because there could be.
There is part of the benefit of a construction manager is to have that process along the way before construction begins. So you have those eyes on there to determine if there's a more efficient way to stage, to sequence, to bid it differently, maybe the timing of it, and to double check the estimates. So to do that. So there's that. And that's the benefit to you. So the sooner that happens, the better. If you go CM, if not, keep it a GC and you don't have to worry about it.
Okay, any other questions, Carrie?
Yeah, I mean, we're going with this MOU, and is it complete that we're gonna go with a new, with aluminum bleachers, and we're gonna go with building off to the side, and we're gonna go with a 7-lane track, and we're gonna go with,
No.
so then,
All that this has given her is the permission that she's our architect to work on this project. Then as this project goes, she starts doing the true schematic designs to say, here's it with aluminum bleachers and a locker underneath, here's aluminum bleachers with a locker on the side, here's a 6-lane track, here's a 7-lane track, here's the soil borings, here's what you need to do, then the board's gotta start making those decisions. But we have to start making some of those decisions in October, November, December, so that January we can start getting them out to bid, February we can get them out to bid, so April 1st we could break ground.
Yeah, the decisions actually have to be made way before December.
All of these are just approximations. We have not made any decisions on the project. But what the MOU is basically saying, Carrie's our architect for it, she'll have 9% at the end of the day, and that she should start going forward and doing the full schematic drawings.
Okay?
And that's the process that we follow, correct?
You've given that look. Have you done
I just-
construction
I might as well
projects that
say
are
it.
problem, or, you know?
Like
Have
there's,
you done construction projects like this before? You know? We hired DLA to give us the.
I understand, to do architectural stuff, right. Understand.
Okay.
so does Carrie need to maybe speak to ease your concern of, Gary's a big financial guy, if you haven't understood that by now.
Yeah.
So when he sees up there that originally we thought we were just resurfacing a 6-lane track, and now there's a possibility of building a brand new 7-lane.
So
track.
what by bringing her on as by bringing her on, what are you gonna give us in order for us to make our decisions?
What am I gonna give you?
Yeah, what are you gonna give us to, or can we make our decisions ahead of that? What gives, what advantage do you give us before we make our decisions? To
I'm not-
decide between a 7-lane track and or leave the track as is and resurface it?
Well, I'm gonna give you a cost estimate to determine the difference between the two based upon, first of all, if you needed a base or not. And we're gonna look at the soil boring, so our structural engineer is gonna analyze that to understand what we need there and the bearing capacity that's below the track. It is determine if the base that is there is significant enough so that no undulations will occur if we do resurface it.
But I think you
So
guys
sure.
implied the fact is that there is a slope already existing around the track, and it wasn't just due to the fact that the track is bubbling up, is that, because I thought he was implying the fact that there is a natural slope from one end of the corner to the other that's causing the track to have did I not read into his implied saying that I know the reason why they have it a little higher over there, because it was to help with the natural, that's what I think he was about to say.
I don't know if he meant to lead you in that direction or not. What I know from that is that the track is sloped towards the field, and it's on the perpendicular direction to the long run. It's supposed to be pretty flat in the
Right.
running direction. What you have are some undulations in that. Some of that is due to surface
Right,
wear
but he
and
also
tear.
mentioned the fact where you're proposing to put the trench is a little higher than another area of the track, and I thought he was implying that there's a natural slope and then if we go to a 7-lane track, we're gonna have to do a whole grading issue then, possibly, to level off the,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yes.
No, what we need to do if we add a 7th lane is to recreate the entire base entirely.
Right.
Even if it's okay or not, because we don't want any change in elevation, because what will happen is that the new lane would not settle or settle more, depending which way, one or the other, and so it would create some type of lip.
So you would come in, and as we go through our options, you're gonna then come through and give us a cost, basically.
I'm
The option.
basically presenting your options to you, right?
And
I'm
costing them out.
designing your options and allowing you the ability to weigh the pros and cons.
And costing them out.
That's correct.
But you're gonna deduce from saying, okay, guess what, board, based on the borings that we've had on the track, it has shown this, X. And by this showing X, you can either do this way or that way. Okay, is that all right?
Or put another way, assuming that, I'm sure Kevin is checking for us, a 9% charge for an architect is pretty standard for the whole thing. And part of your cost is if you have to produce 7 sets of drawing, it costs you more than doing 6 sets, but that's what it is once you get into it. And in each portion of it, like we talked about before, if, you know, we're asking you to give different alternatives, well, could we put Kevin will give them to you, but can we, all right, you got 2 different designs already with the locker rooms and the concessions. So one other alternatives, can we put them under? And you might find a couple things. A, we can't because we can't go that high. B, if we do it, we have to put sprinkler systems in. So here's 3 alternatives. We considered, we have to reject one because the building code won't allow it. Or let's say the building code did allow it, but if we do that, we have to put $100,000 worth of sprinkler systems in, right? And then if we leave the tennis courts and put parking, we're gonna have to extend our water retention system in some way. So we have to go again. If you put the tennis courts in North Riverside, and yes, the Brookfield people can't enjoy them as much, but the other people in our community can, and they're gonna maintain them next to the fields they maintained that our baseball and softball played at for years. We could do that, and we save the annual maintenance fee because they're gonna maintain them, but if we put them here, we have this additional cost of the drainage system, right? And in each step of the way, until you get it the way we want it based on the estimates, you're gonna have to keep revising them, and then you do a final plan that would go out to the contractors.
Yes.
Okay.
There's supposed to be, at some point in time, there needs to be a decision made, you know, the longer we wait in doing that, though, the more you're just pushing back the start of construction. So
Right.
you would be looking at 2016 versus 2019.
And then the one last thing we're asking, and kind of what Ed's gonna do is, if they're, kind of over, we don't wanna hire 2 people that, they're both that are contracts say they're supposed to do the same thing, and then appears, and again, I'm not doing it as a finger pointing thing, that was a problem the last time, like, some people thought one representative was doing it, some thought another, some thought it was the general contractor, and Kevin and Tim and Joel have been fixing a handful of the problems for, 3 or 4 years still, so that's what I think, as much as anything else, as a board want to avoid, whatever we contract to and pay for, we're hoping when it's done, people aren't looking back at it 4 years later and say, why, we have to redo this again.
Right, I think that's a great point. Like, I with the whole 9% and what, like, I just don't ask her to come to the meeting. I speak to her about 2 hours a day.
I
We get
understand
Tim's. I'm talking a little more to Gary on what we're getting for our 9%. So like, the 20-something
I
drawings that
understand that,
Mike
but
and
then
I
when
have
you,
done
when
for
you,
meetings. and-
when you look at the amount that McHugh got, the last construction progress, and got way over budget what they originally budgeted for. I think they originally budgeted for $4 million, they wound up getting, I don't know what it was, $6.5 million.
Right.
And how often had you had a chance to, they answer your phone calls when we ran into problems with any of the stuff that happened here?
White was the one that was responsible.
Right. So, I mean, I just don't want a same situation where we have the right people, we have the right, and at the right cost.
So that's why I think she brought the option of watching this whole pool thing kind of go down while we've been using their engineer, and that's why she said, knowing your community and knowing your board, you might want to have another set of eyes in between the work being done and what the architect's doing. So there's 2 people reporting to the board and superintendent, the architect and the construction manager. I don't know what an owner's rep does compared to what a construction manager does. So that might help someone like Laura who said, well, didn't we have a construction manager because we had Oakwood Consulting in the big project?
But then we had Andy Taunton for the general manager, so we had both, and so.
He was a GC.
And Andy Taunton was your general contractor.
And he was
Right.
McHugh.
He was
Right,
McHugh.
and then we had the owner's rep, who
Yeah,
was
and how,
supposed to
and
help
then
with all the.
how many times has Andy returned a phone call when Kevin called him?
I don't know what happened at that point, because I was not there at that point.
Right.
But the first part, you had him on the video, he was here every day, he was working with the board up front. What happened to those notes? I don't know what happened to those.
Are you able to tell us, Carrie, in your experience, what's the difference between an owner's rep and a construction manager?
I have never seen them on the same site before in my experience, so
You
what
never
I.
seen a GC and an owner's rep together?
No, Gene.
No, a construction manager and an owner's rep together on the same project. I just understand it as a replacement for, a CM. That's how I've seen it utilized. We work with one at Community District 218. It's a retired individual from, they used to work at an architecture firm, and he is their kind of eyes and ears in the field.
Okay.
And he goes out and does a lot of construction observation on their behalf.
Who's
Okay.
218?
What is it? It's
Evergreen
it's
Park.
Oak Lawn, it's in
Oh.
Oak Lawn, yeah.
Okay. All right, Carrie.
It's Oklahoma.
Carrie, thank you very much. You know directionally where I want to go. Where we're going.
So Carrie, you and I will work on the MOU, we'll get that ready to go on the 9th. I'll have our attorneys look at that again, you have your feedback from your attorneys. And then, so Gary understands none of the, all the dollar amounts that you have in there are approximations.
That's correct. They're
As long
not,
as
they're
Gary
not hard
understands
numbers.
that. All right,
Wait, I haven't had my single say.
okay. I thought we've had a lot of says.
No, you alluded to the fact that your documents, basically construction manager or general, your documents and your professional opinion is basically gold that everyone is going to refer to, right?
That's correct.
And nothing gets modified unless you okay it as an architect.
That's correct.
Okay. And Gary, the other thing, I don't know who got these soil samples going, but it was a good idea. I mean, that's basically
Let's deal with it.
it's gonna answer the question if we're gonna do 6 or 7, if you look at the numbers.
All right, Carrie, thank you very much. Sorry I kept you up
Thank
so
you,
late.
Carrie.
Thanks, Carrie.
Do I have, we're gonna go to closed session to discuss personnel matters, student discipline, sale, lease of property, and litigation. Can I have a motion on this, please?
Resolved that the Board of Education, Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois, enters closed session for the purpose of considering appointment, employment, or dismissal of employees, student discipline, sale or lease of land, and litigation.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mike Welch. Mary Ann?
Mr. Goodchick?
Yes.
Ms. Ruska? Mr. Jefferson?
Yes.
Dr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Yes. All right, we're gonna be done for tonight. You've learned a lot about construction today. It's 9:25. We're gonna meet for our closed session.